Good evening and welcome to Responding to COVID-19, Fueling the Economy on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, and TTT Live online on Facebook. I am Wesley Gibbings. Among the more difficult challenges to have arisen during the course of the pandemic are the trials of the global energy sector. True, there were big downward trends observed prior to the outbreak, but government actions have had the impact of slowing trade, industrial and commercial activity everywhere. To help us unravel the implications of this on Trinidad and Tobago are two industry leaders, Mark Loquan, who's president of the National Gas Company, and Dr. Dax Driver, CEO of the Energy Chamber. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Well, Mark, as I said, even prior to the pandemic, to the onset of the pandemic, there were difficulties being experienced with regard to the global markets. An oversupply, declining demand, and the corresponding impact on prices. How have pandemic conditions impacted on that, either negatively or positively? In what way has the pandemic contributed to the challenges?
Well, if you take two separate issues, if you separate oil from the gas side. On the oil side, of course, there's a combination of two issues happening here. One, of course, has been the Saudi Arabia and Russia oil production wars to try to push the American producers out. And that was resulting in an oversupply in the market and a drop in oil prices. And at the same time, you see when COVID came along, there's been, a drastic reduction in jet fuel because of the differences in flights. And I mean, for April and May, you're talking flights going down to about 35% of the normal levels. And in the case of global road traffic, which is, in about 150 countries, you're getting about 40% reduction. And what that translates to is, a case where you have reducing oil demand coinciding with an oversupply of production. Now, there was a recent, agreement to cut just under 10 million barrels of oil out of the system, but that is still about half of the surplus that still exists. So if you look at the oil prices today, it's WTI was in the low 20s and Brent was closer to the high 20s or $30 per barrel. So the impacts of both the Russia and Saudi Arabia issue as well as COVID has certainly resulted in drastic reduction in oil prices. And on the gas side of the business, what you see is, there was already a lot of LNG projects coming on stream. Even the U.S. accelerating LNG projects on stream. And then what you saw is that there was, warmer winters and, the growth in energy demand. You had basically an oversupplied market until the mid-2020s. Some say earlier, some say later, depending on who you speak to. And of course, when COVID came along, you also see, reductions in industrial demand. You see terminals shutting down in India. So you had basically some impacts on gas as well, but I would say the more significant impact was on the oil side. LNG has had some impacts as well, and you see the price markers in an oversupplied market, particularly when you start to look at Asia and Europe. You start to see low prices in those markets, and you also start to see high inventories of gas in Europe. So if you can't get your cargoes in Asia, you would have tried to get it in Europe, but even that has high inventory. So you could see there's there's impacts everywhere going on in both the oil and gas side of the globe.
So, Dr. Driver, are these trends, do you expect to see them for some time again?
Yes, I think, well, I mean, it's very difficult to predict what's going on with the demand side and with the response to the coronavirus. So we just don't know what's going to happen there. But the oversupply, the basic oversupply situation which the world is facing will continue. And with the lack of demand because of the coronavirus measures which have been put in place around the world, that we expect that to continue for some time. The long-term pressure on pricing is certainly downwards.
And the uncertainty over how long this is likely to last, how does that fit into the business models, let's say, of your member companies, for example? Well, uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, this is an industry which is used to dealing with uncertainty and used to dealing with prices varying because of geopolitics or because of supply situations. So the industry has been through price crises before. This is a little bit of a different one because it was really, on the oil side in particular, so sudden and so intense. But companies will respond by delaying their CapEx projects. They're trying to cut costs. This is the typical ways that people will respond. For Trinidad and Tobago, what that means is that we have to make sure that we are an attractive destination for investment. We haven't seen any announcements yet of major upstream capital investment projects being delayed here. There's been some delays announced in Guyana, but delays, not projects being cancelled. And we just have to continue to monitor that and make sure that Trinidad is an attractive place to do.
Yeah, Mark, on the natural gas side, foreign direct investment is a big factor in terms of the sustainability of the sector here. Are you seeing trends that are encouraging, or do you see sort of depressed conditions continuing for the time being with the possibility of catching up later on?
Well, I think you certainly are going through a cycle now where prior to this issue of COVID coming along, we already had relatively low petchem prices in both ammonia and methanol. And then we also had it in the LNG, as I've explained before. What you see has happened is, of course, the industrial demand has changed, and you even see it in some of the companies like Methanex has already announced that due to this reduced demand, you see some plants in Trinidad actually taking decisions, as well as in Chile, that they made decisions to meet this uncertain reduced demand that is going on. So I think the effects on Trinidad, yes, you are feeling it, but at the same time, right now we're trying to continue with stable supply. We're trying to continue uninterrupted, provide electricity, and continue to optimize and coordinate even more between the upstream and downstream. So I think from the Trinidad side, while we cannot control the global side of things, I think on the operational side here, and continuing to work with the upstream and downstream companies, there are challenges, of course, but I think we've managed to respond fairly well in this environment.
But what are you spoke about the Methanex example, but other enterprises in the sector, what kind of corporate trends are you seeing there? Are there job losses? Is business contracting to the extent that some of them might be reconsidering their investment?
Well, if we talk on
this is for Mark first, and then Dr. Driver, you can come in.
You're talking on the global front, or are you just talking Trinidad right now?
Yeah, well, globally, we have a pretty good idea that it has not been neutral with respect to the impact on corporate enterprises. globally. But in Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of those upstream and downstream players who are in the market, are you seeing trends that are tending in the direction of scaling back, people rethinking their investment and so on?
No, I think as Dax said, we don't see that quite yet, and so there's still. I think everyone though is reviewing their programs. Certainly, the companies that operate here also operate on the global fronts, and you see some of the companies like Shell exiting, certain or delaying certain FIDs and projects or exiting certain JVs. You see everyone scaling back in CapEx and OpEx. We haven't seen that here, but we know people are reviewing their development programs and so on. But from where we sit, the operations continue unabated, and the developments are continuing. So until they review those plans, we will see some changes. But for sure, in this environment globally, there's a constant review of the changes in the financial environment and the capital investments that go along. But these are the cycles that go along in a business that has a fairly long-term perspective.
Okay, Dax Driver, from your perspective.
Well, what I would probably highlight is also the impact here locally on the energy services industry, on the contractors and the service company who service the industry. Because the operator companies have scaled down the operations to respond to the need for social distancing and to have as few people as possible interacting on their sites, you've seen projects, major maintenance projects being postponed until later in the year. That has a major impact on the service companies and contractors who rely upon those projects for their business. So we haven't seen very much in the way of job losses yet, but what we have seen is hiring that should have taken place, which everyone was expecting to happen during this month of April, now not happening. So there are households who were hoping to get income through working in those major maintenance projects, who are now not having that income. So it has an impact through it to the household level. And it obviously has a very major impact on many of our member companies in the services sector. That sector has tried very hard over the last few years to diversify their markets and to export more services to the wider Caribbean.
Okay, that's a very specific, I want to come back to that because I wanted us to deal with those opportunities, but we have to take a short break now, and we'll come right back to that in terms of the opportunities for diversification with respect to the service companies. So we'll be right back. Stay with us on Responding to COVID-19. Welcome back to Responding to COVID-19, Fueling the Economy on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, and TTT Live online on Facebook. I am Wesley Gibbings. With me this evening are Mark Loquan, President of the National Gas Company, and Dr. Dax Driver, CEO of the Energy Chamber. We are discussing the impact of global developments in the energy sector on Trinidad and Tobago. And when we took the break, Dr. Driver was explaining to us or discussing the whole issue of the opportunities for diversification that lie before the service companies in particular in Trinidad and Tobago, with emerging opportunities, I would imagine, in Guyana, Suriname, and Mark Loquan, of course, will talk to us about the situation in terms of Ghana, where opportunities exist. But Dr. Driver, we broke into your train of thought when we took the break, but continue with that on that point.
Well, I mean, the point I was making is that the services sector in Trinidad, I think, has really gone after the opportunity in the wider region in the last few years, and people have invested in setting up operations, particularly in Guyana, obviously. Guyana now the biggest oil producer in the Caribbean, producing more oil than Trinidad now. As of today, less in total hydrocarbons, but on oil alone, that they're producing more than Trinidad, and set to grow very strongly. So our member companies have gone into Guyana, set up set up operations. They've set up operations in Suriname for many, many years now. They've been in Suriname, but also in the wider region, opportunities throughout the Eastern Caribbean and in Jamaica and Dominican Republic. Now, the challenge now that they face is that they can't access those opportunities now because of the travel restrictions. Because typically the way in which the energy service companies will operate in those places is Trinidadian workers will move, they will go for a few weeks to work on a project in one of those locations and then come back again. Obviously, with the travel restrictions in place, that can't happen. So that is a major problem now for our services industry. Those opportunities will come back when travel restrictions are lifted, but in the immediate term, it puts a further pressure on them. So not only is there less work for them in Trinidad, their ability to access those opportunities in the wider region has also decreased significantly. So those companies are facing very serious liquidity issues. They're trying as hard as they can to keep everybody employed, but it's a real struggle for them to do that in the current period.
Mark Loquan, in an earlier conversation we had in a previous program, we spoke a bit about the NGC, the reviewing or revisiting of the NGC mandate, which would include embracing opportunities overseas. And I did mention Ghana a short while ago. Ghana exists. What has happened in the interim, if anything?
Well, certainly in the case of Ghana, since then there have been some documents or discussions going on with respect to some memorandums of understanding between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Ghana. And this involved particularly projects around pipeline opportunities in Ghana, which would need to go through its project stage gate process, as well as some opportunities with either improving the efficiency of the existing gas processing units via PPGPL. And there's one gas processing unit in Ghana that has been operating, let's say, inefficiently. And there's also the possibility of some expansions which PPGPL will have to look at and go through their own stage gate process. So that has happened in the last weeks. And in the meantime, there's also been a focus on, we remain focused on trying to look across the entire value chain. And that involves from upstream as well as midstream, downstream, and even marketing and trading. So you would see that while Ghana is a possibility in terms of some of these technical services and pipelines, there's also opportunities with respect to some strategic partnerships, some of which we have started to look at in China, where if we get past all of this, if you look at the energy business for the long term, some of the key markets that you're talking about for energy is actually in China and India, and some of those areas. So the emerging markets, China and India, you would have seen us also diversifying and forming strategic partnerships there. So it's really looking across the chain and seeing where we can get some value added.
Is Venezuela still in the picture?
Venezuela, there's some work still going on, I would say, at a low technical level. There are no key decisions being made with respect to the Dragon work, but the conversations are still ongoing. So there's more technical in nature as opposed to taking any big decisions based on what's going on there. You would have seen also that there was Shell looking at manatee on our own shores, and also taking that forward. So the Venezuela situation is a bit uncertain now, but there's still work going on at a low technical level, and conversations are still happening.
Dax, how have the business continuity plans of the companies in the energy sector held up so far?
Well, I think on the whole very well. This is a sector which plans well in advance, had continuity in place from all the major operators, and they just implemented those projects. So they are they're working safely, and they're keeping the country's lights on. And I think we need to acknowledge and thank all of the essential workers in that industry who are away from their homes. They're having to very often they're having to quarantine themselves away from their families. So it's a real strain when people want to be at home in these difficult times with their families. But the energy sector workers take their responsibilities very seriously, and they are out there working. And I think the whole country needs to. Sometimes we ignore these men and women who are out there. Keeping the lights on and keeping the whole economy running. If it wasn't for them, we would have no electricity, and the economy would grind to a halt. So I think that we need to recognise those people, and the companies have their plans in place and are doing everything they need to do in order to keep operating. And we need to recognise the excellence we have in Trinidad in this sector, and the work, this fantastic work which everyone continues to do, and not take it for granted.
And I suppose, Mark Loquan, along those lines, failure or stopping or pausing is not an option when it comes to NGC, because NGC is central to keeping the country working.
Well, I certainly would like to build on what Dax has said, and this is an opportunity to also say thank you and extend my great appreciation for all the people at NGC that are working so hard and keeping the business critical activities going. Lights are still on, and the country is still operating. Gas is still flowing to the plants, and the light industrial customers. So that is a good thing during this time. So I'd like to thank the NGC workers as well, of course, as the essential services and frontline medical workers and so on.
Okay, a quick one before we go, Dax Driver. Now, globally, I follow the climate change discussion very keenly, and I'm seeing it's almost as if that movement is taking a little bit of a backseat now as companies try to survive. Is the climate change or renewable energy issue putting a pause on things, or is that very much at the forefront in terms of the research and development work of the global companies?
No, I think it's still very much at the forefront. Obviously, everyone is concentrating on what's right in front of them at the moment with the crisis. But all of the long-term issues which are driving people to investing in renewables, and particularly in energy efficiency, which is something which both Mark, Loquan, and myself often talk about and have worked on jointly, the energy efficiency side of it, which is absolutely crucial. But those things are going ahead. And expect the energy transition is certainly not stopping. Those are forces which are going to continue, and our industry needs to be operating on knowing full well that that's the direction which the world is going in. There are still tremendous opportunities particularly in gas, in the medium to long term. But also in oil. Oil is still here, and the oil industry will bounce back coming out of this crisis. There's still lots and lots of cars and lots of trucks and ships and planes all around the world which will need petroleum products and a lot of petrochemicals. So that industry is not going away, but the energy transition is happening.
Okay, Mark, a quick word on that before we leave.
Well, I would say that, if we look at the BP outlook to 2040, you see the renewables clearly taking a much more significant growth between now and then, but it is still not sufficient to still cover the world's energy needs. However, having said that, I think in 2020 there's going to be a natural slowdown. Not that it would stop, but the growth will not be as big as was expected. You see figures like 5% lower in wind in terms of the growth, and 10% lower than what was estimated in terms of the solar projects. But the message here is that for the long-term picture, if you have to provide energy for a growing population, climate change is a big issue. And certainly in the Caribbean area, where we have seen that so visible close at home, and you see countries in the Caribbean experiencing severe damage, but yet are focusing very heavily on the right things like energy efficiency and renewables. I think the whole issue of the CARICOM energy focus, as well as our ability right here in Trinidad to possibly provide LNG as a clean fuel to replace some of the petroleum-related products there that the Caribbean is using. The Caribbean uses over 80% in petroleum products. They don't use LNG and so on and gas. So it does mean that there should be, I think, an even more aggressive look at the Caribbean once we get through this crisis in terms of playing a different role, not only in Trinidad, but in this region.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for staying with us on Responding to COVID-19, Fueling the Economy on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, and TTT Live Online on Facebook. I am Wesley Gibbings, thanking Mark Loquan, President of the National Gas Company, and Dr. Dax Driver of the Energy Chamber for providing useful insights into the impact of the global energy sector on Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much. Please stay home, stay safe, save a life.